So today we're joined by the wonderful Mark Johnathan. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on this lovely sunny day. It's not the most cheery subject to cover, but I was quite keen that we point out that things do go wrong and it can feel quite overwhelming, and whilst we feel like we're the only people that it ever happens to, it happens to us all. So that's why we're part of this discussion. I wonder if we could just start with a little bit about you and your background and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, well, hello everybody. It's great to be here. I feel honoured, very honoured, given the amazing people you've had talking and still have to come. What a great course you put together, Rory. So I was passionate about theatre from before I knew how to spell the word. I think pantomime was probably my first influence, but I was at school, and by 11, I remember my mother saying to me, how was your first day at school? And I said, well, it was all right, but I thought you said it was a good school. And she said, it's a good school. It's got all these different facilities. I said, the lighting rig's crap. So I'd got my eye on lighting rigs before the age of 11. By the time I was 16, I got into the NYT, the National Youth Theatre of Great Britain. And in those days, we could rock up for the entire summer without it being a problem. You know, it was possible to stay in London for the whole summer. Didn't have to go and get a job. You could just go and do the NYT if you got in. So we got amazing experience. Also, the NYT had its own theatre, which it ran professionally for the rest of the year, 510 seats, the Shore Theatre. And that was an incredible resource to have. So I did one season of that and I went back to school. And then when I went the second year, I got put on a special project in the Cockpit Theatre in London, which was a flexible theatre which could become a theatre in the round, which was very new in those days. And I was dispatched there, and they always employed a freelance they always employed a professional lighting designer. Except on this case, I didn't think it was going to be very big, so it was sort of almost a private project, only going to do a few performances. And so it seemed that I was going to light it, which I did. And we did our performances. I think the fact that it sold out was probably helped by the photograph of a lot of nearly naked boys that appeared in Time Out. They were queuing around the block. Anyway, curiously, in this cast, when I look back at it, it had people who were all going to go on and win Olivier's and Tonys and Oscars, Tim Spall, Tim McInerney, and Daniel Day-Lewis, for example. Anyway, it was before memory boards. It was the first time I'd ever had a 2 preset lighting desk. My fingers flew across this desk. It was one of those plays that needed lots of locations, and we used every corner, the upper levels within the theatre. And the one bit of direction the director gave me was no colour. It was a good thing he gave me that, because the rig was stretched to reach all these different locations. Anyway, my fingers flew across the keyboard, across the presets, and quite bizarrely, I was offered a job. Even more bizarrely, I didn't discuss it with my parents. I just ran away from school and took the job.
Yeah.
What you do? And after a little bit, my mother got a phone call from the headmaster inquiring when I might be coming back, because I'd got permission to go back late because I was in the NYT, very prestigious. And I got home late, and I said to my mother I had rugby practice or something, and she said, we need to have a chat. And so I told her, of course my parents were absolutely horrified. I said, it's all right, I've got a place at drama school and I've got enough O-levels to go to drama school. You didn't have to have the A-levels, of which I had done 1 year of English, literature, history and music. And so I took the job. Well, I'd already taken it anyway. As it got to the time I was supposed to go to drama school, in the interim, I'd been given by the theatre an equity card. And in those days, equity cards were like gold dust.
Mm.
And equity was a closed shop. And if you were in stage management, and normally I was an ASM, although I was largely doing lighting, if you got given a provisional card, for which you had to get 40 weeks of work. And for an actor not working every week, that was quite hard. For me, with a permanent job, I was able to fulfill that in 40 weeks. However, on the 39th week, I was due to go to drama school. So I wrote to them and said, can I come a week late? And they wrote back and said, no, you can come a year late. So I said, okay, great. So I carried on. And the following year, I was having such a good time, I wrote to them again and said, can I delay for another year? And they said, yeah. So I carried on. I was doing all sorts of things as an ASM. I was working the lights, flying scenery, buying props, everything. It was a great education. Coming to the third year, I said to everybody, right, everybody, I'm off to drama school now. And they said to me, oh, are you crazy? You've got your name up in lights at the Royal Court. You don't need to go now. And I went, oh, okay. So I didn't go. Anyway, time passed and I graduated up to being a chief electrician in London. And I worked with my hero lighting designer, who at the time, I hope you've all got a hero lighting designer. But anyway, mine was Robert Bryan. He did the most fantastic lighting, particularly in opera. And he came to light at our theatre. I was like, wow. I just ran everywhere, getting in everything. Anyway, that passed. But he was resident lighting designer at Glyndebourne. And if you don't know what Glyndebourne is, you should look it up. Glyndebeourne, later, not now. Glyndebourne, the D is silent. And I was at Glyndebourne, went to see a performance at Glyndebourne, and I walked around a corner into Robert Bryan. He said, come for a drink afterwards. And so we did, and we talked, and he said, you want to work here, don't you? And I went, yes. I could barely speak, I was so shy. Difficult to believe now, I know. Anyway, I got a job at Glyndebourne, which was my dream job. That was in 1978. Quite a lot of years ago, anyway. I can't do the sums anymore. 40 years later, which I think was a couple of years ago, in 2018, I went back to Glyndebourne actually to light the opening and the closing production as lighting designer. So it was a wonderful full circle. But getting the job at Glyndebourne also allowed me to do my other dream, which was skiing. And I was working on qualifying as a ski teacher, which if you're from South London is quite hard, because the people who were examining you didn't believe in those days that people from London could be ski instructors. You had to either be from the Cairngorms in Scotland or the Alpine countries. Anyway, I qualified as a ski teacher and I worked across Europe as a ski teacher. And the interesting thing, folks, was that when I worked in Switzerland for many years, was expected rather, to speak not only the language of that region of Switzerland, which was French, but the other national languages of Switzerland, which were German and Italian. We were let off Romanche. So I learned to speak 3 foreign languages. And then I got moved on, although I kept my qualifications up as a ski teacher, I got moved up into resort management and then country management for big tour operators. And I got trained in management. All of this was going to stand me in very good stead. In 1992, Glyndebourne was being knocked down to build a new one, a bigger one. But we were all going to lose our jobs for a year while they very quickly built an amazing opera house. At the same time, the company that I was working for, which was the biggest in winter sports, collapsed because it was a bit like now, there was a really big recession, but there was also a war going on in Kuwait, and the Americans stopped traveling, and our travel company had an airline, and that went under, and it took us all with it. Suddenly, in 1992, I hadn't got a job, and so it happened that the job of head of lighting at the National Theatre was advertised. And my boss at Glyndebourne, by now at Glyndebourne, I'd started at the bottom rung job and I was now deputy lighting manager. And the lighting manager prodded at this advert and said, you should apply for that job, get some practice at going for interviews, meaning you go for the interview, but you don't get the job, get some practice, he said. Anyway, so I went for the interview, two 2-hour interviews, and got the job. one of the things I learnt in travel, which I'd been trained in, was how to bullshit well, you know, how to sell our travel company over another one. And so I could sell Mark Johnathan over anybody else. So to 1993, I arrived at the National Theatre in charge of everything to do with lights, and 3 theatres, tours, the installation of all these theatres, all the equipment and infrastructure. It was pretty scary. I did that for 10 years. So I worked under Richard Eyre, Sir Richard Eyre, Sir Trevor Nunn, and Sir Nick Heitner arrived, and they wanted to restructure the technical management, and I didn't really fancy what they wanted to do, and I decided that I was going to go freelance. Now, I had worked as a lighting designer rather cleverly while I was at the National. I used to, apart from skiing in my holidays, I used to go off and light shows, and so I built up a bit of a portfolio while I was at the National, which included, quite soon after I arrived at the National, I found myself lighting for Sir David Bintley, director of the Birmingham Royal Ballet. And he said he was a bit bored with ballet lighting designers, but not tell the ballet lighting designers that. And so he took me on to light his first production as artistic director of the company, which was Far From the Madding Crowd. It was a monster of a piece. Mm. And I did a good enough job because he then continued to use me, not only me, he often used Peter Mutford, but he used me a lot. And 25 years later, I've done quite a lot of ballet. Having done Birmingham Royal Ballet, that gave me the entree to the Royal Ballet. And curiously, after 10 years at the National, I decided it was time to move on and go freelance. And my first jobs as freelance lighting designer was same month lighting Beauty and the Beast, big 3-act, 2-act, big full-length ballet for Birmingham Royal Ballet, and in the same month the big 3-act Ashton Cinderella, another monster of a piece. And do you know, Rory, the one thing that I realised in 2003, having been working for 30 years, I was not ready one day sooner to light at the Royal Opera House. God, it was scary. God, it could go wrong so easily. And I mean, lighting it was easy enough, but doing it in the time, doing it with all the communication that you needed to engage with was quite something. I just pop that in because sometimes I feel with young lighting designers that you're in too much of a hurry, and don't rush, because sometimes you're only just ready for the job and sometimes you're not ready for the job and you have to get through it even though you weren't quite ready for that one. Anyway, that was 2003, and I have been going freelance ever since. I like plays, operas, ballets, musicals, even done shows on ice and juggling. It was lighting my first juggling show that I coined the phrase, light his balls. Light his balls. No, the ones in the air. Sorry. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, I'll light, like Tim Mitchell, I'll light anything that somebody will pay me some money to go and do.
Yeah. And you achieved the ski dream as well. I mean, now you're a phenomenal skier and a ski instructor. And
yeah, it's very kind of you to say. The thing that I moved into was, if any of you are skiers, was backcountry off-piste skiing. And given the current situation, I may be back out there. I do ski a lot, but I might just, as we say, put on the red jacket again, because I'm not sure if we're going to be doing much work this winter. And I should say, if we didn't mention it, I am the deputy chair of the ALD, and I'm passionate about what we're trying to do in that organisation. And I hope, if you're not already, that you will join the ALD. Sorry, brief commercial there.
That's brilliant. I mean, what a life and what a career. But I mean, what we're here to sort of talk about is, I suppose, in a way, the sort of grimmer aspects, when it feels like it's not coming together, which I think so often can feel like we're the only ones that you're sitting in that room and you think, God, why is it me? Like, no one else must have this problem, but we all have those problems. So, I mean, if we look at the very beginning of the process, and we talk contracts, for example, I mean, no matter how good your agent is or how good you are at negotiating, I mean, sometimes you just don't get what you want, and that's really hard sometimes, I think. Is that...
So your question is about what's going on in terms of getting the job, in terms of money and the deal. Yeah. Yeah,
and it can be quite, I mean, you just can feel quite deflated when you go through this hard work of negotiating and you don't necessarily, it doesn't go your way.
Yeah. Look, after a while, you need an agent, and I'm aware that a lot of young emerging lighting designers don't have agents yet, and so you have to do your own deal. The problem with doing your own deal is that you've got to then try and have a nice relationship, probably with the same person that you're working with, or it may be with, just one person aside from the director. There's the administrator or the producer. And so as soon as you can, I recommend getting an agent, but they won't take you on straight away. You have to decide what is the deal breaker. And I don't know if you've had this if it's happened to you, Rory, because we do have the same agent actually, where they'll say, well, is this a deal breaker? When I say, gotta have business class flights. Is this a deal breaker, MJ? They say. And I go, oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Deal breaker means that if you don't get it, you're not going to do the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you need to be prepared to walk away from the job if you don't get your deal. It's important that they understand, the producer understands why you need these things. On one occasion, I said to the producer, the agent had done the deal, but I was going to do Chichester. I was an associate at Chichester at the time, Chichester Festival. And I was shown this horrible 3-bedroomed house, big 3-bedroomed house. It smelt, and like someone had died in it, I think. But anyway, I said, I can't be creative living in this house. Well, crikey, that woke them up. I was moved out straight away. The producer then said to me, I've been to see the house that you were given. And I thought, oh God, here we go. He's going to say that I was completely unreasonable and ungrateful and it was a perfectly fine house. And he said, you were absolutely right. I couldn't be creative in that environment either. Oh, I said, thank you. We've taken it off the list. So sometimes, you think you're not going to get it and you do. When you decide you have gone as far as you can go and they're not going any further, you just need to weigh up the pros and cons.
Yeah.
Had this recently with a young line designer who asked us for advice, who's in the ALD. And I didn't say you must or must not do it. I said, look, draw the line down the page and write down the pros and the cons. I'm going to get some experience. Am I going to meet people? Will they use me again in a better job? Will it be fun? Other side of the page, is it going to be a nightmare? Am I going to have to pay for my own travel expenses? Is the accommodation going to be shit? Maybe don't do it.
Yeah.
Once you decide you're doing it, you have to put everything into that. And I'll do shows that I'm very poorly paid for or very well paid, but they get the same Mark Johnathan and the same amount of brilliance that I can give them.
Yeah.
But you've got to try and have a deal that is practicable. They'll try it on. The producer will say, well, you've lit the show before it's transferring into the West End. This happened to me. I can't imagine why you can't have it all done by the first preview. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then you can leave it. And I'm going, don't be ridiculous. We'll still be working on the show. It'll be improving. Yeah. I've got to have my program and I've got to be there for longer.
Yeah. And I think it's also, there is an element of you have to know and fight for your own worth, don't you? You know, there comes a point that it's just unfair.
Yeah. It's also, this is a really important point, folks, it's got to be balanced. By that I mean, you can't be paid £500 more than the director's being paid and the designer. It's got to be in context with everybody else who's working on the show. You know, at the same time, it can't be a rip-off. And we are seeing a lot of rip-offs. We're seeing things where you don't even get enough money in the fee to pay your travel expenses.
Yeah.
And we have to fight that from happening. And we at the ALD, we are encouraging people to engage in a conversation with each other. How much did you get paid for that? How much do you think I should be paid for that? And while the ALD isn't a union, we are trying to give guidance and support to stopping the rip-offs from happening.
Yeah. And I think one of the sort of takes us quite nicely onto one of the issues that can sometimes feel quite overwhelming and stressful is that we generally have to juggle multiple jobs all at once. But the reality is that I think Bruno maybe covered this actually. Nobody cares about anything other than their own show. So it's a tricky. I mean, do you ever feel overwhelmed when you're juggling multiple jobs?
Yeah, it looked okay in the diary. You know, it looked okay that I could open Il Trittico, 3 operas in one evening, directed by 2 of the most famous Hollywood film directors, clang, in Hollywood, in Los Angeles. That was opening on the Saturday, and it looked fine that I could be at a run by 5 p.m. in Helsinki on Monday. Yeah, that's no problem. Except that Helsinki is 10 hours ahead of LA. I ran into that rehearsal and everybody was doing this. We've been waiting for you. I was still in my shorts, sort of, you know, from the summer's day in Los Angeles. It was quite cold in Helsinki. I've had weeks where I was commuting between Munich, Bayerische Staatsoper, where I was doing a new opera. But of course, you know, in opera, we get a day off or 2 days off between one rehearsal and the next. And so they were bringing back The Sleeping Beauty at the Royal Opera House. And I was nipping home, doing 2 days at the Royal Opera House and then whizzing back out after the afternoon, you know, in the afternoon to be back the next day in Munich. So it went sort of Saturday, Munich, Sunday morning, fly Royal Opera House, Sunday, Monday, Royal Opera House, Monday night, fly Munich, Tuesday, rehearsal, Munich, Wednesday morning, crack of dawn, like 5 a.m, fly to Royal Opera House. Oh yeah, Tuesday was the general in Munich. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Royal Opera House. Thursday night, fly back for Friday opening, Munich. Saturday, Royal Opera House. Sunday, fly to Los Angeles.
Well, that is a particularly, I should point out, particularly extreme example.
It is an extreme example, and I should have been going clang, name drop, with each one. Here's the thing. I'm standing at London City Airport on the Thursday, and I was working in Munich for Hollywood film director, the director of The Exorcist and French Connection, Billy Friedkin, clang. When the phone rings, I'm at the airport, and it's his secretary in America, right? She calls me to say, Billy's looking for you. Where are you? Oh. Now, this is an important point that's coming up here. Do we tell him what we're doing or not? Could you tell Billy I'll be back very shortly, but be there in an hour and a half. You know, and I get all bit, oh yeah, nothing. I just want to go through a few things that we're going to go over tomorrow. And I'll just sort of go over it again and again and again. So the question arises, shall I tell them what I'm doing or not? Because they panic sometimes. Generally, I think it's a good idea to tell people because that's what makes you nervous when you haven't told them.
Yeah.
More down to earth level, I had a situation where I had a regular job in London and I got a show that I'd lit, and they wanted me to do my own relights. Always good to try and relight your own shows as well as relighting other people's. And all I had to do was skip off work on the Monday. So this is a long, long time ago, folks. I decided to develop a strange illness, which would require me to go for tests every Monday. Hospital tests every Monday, you see. So I'm afraid I won't be able to my tests. Well, this is before mobile phones. You know, you can't get away with this stuff now because it's all on social media and everything. It was, you know, but I remember being in Southsea, lighting the show on a Grandmaster, which was a nightmare. And every time they would sort of put an announcement out, you know, saying telephone call for or at the stage door. I thought, God, they're ringing up for me to, you know, they say they've found out what I'm doing. And I couldn't face watching the show. I just ran out of the theatre as they called the half-hour call and sort of just drove home. And I think I decided then that I wasn't going to lie again or manipulate the truth. So nowadays, I come clean and I say, is it okay if I do this?
Yeah.
You know, I will absolutely be there for your dress rehearsal, and I'll be absolutely back for the opening night clean-up day, but I want to go and do something else then. And you don't feel so nervous then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We can't ever let them feel that they're not getting 101% of us. Because even if you've accepted a crap fee, you've accepted the fee.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got to give them everything. What was the question?
No,
have I answered it?
You have. It was just about, do you ever feel overwhelmed when juggling multiple jobs? But yes, I mean, clearly you did at some point, and that's...
Well, yeah, I mean, at the time, I did with when I just drove home from Southsea. Years later, when I was belting between the Royal Opera House in Munich and then the next day flying to Los Angeles, I was running on pure adrenaline.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I do that now. Yeah, probably would. And let's remember, folks, in those situations, it's rare that the other company will pay your travel. Because Munich says, well, we pay you to come out and then we pay you at the end to go back. And then the Royal Opera House says, well, we pay you to come out and see. Well, we don't have to pay you because you live in London, don't you? You don't live in Munich. And so you end up paying for all of that. And you have to go, well, yes, I need to, because even though the Royal Opera House don't pay you very much for going back, your name's on the bill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is that
Munich were paying me a lot of money.
And is it, I mean, this wasn't something I was going to ask, but I mean, the thought of that, I mean, like, I've had busy moments, obviously.
Oh, yes, you have.
The thought of that does nothing for me at the minute. Like, in the current climate of pottering around the house, making cups of tea whenever I fancy it. Are you looking forward to going back to that kind of madness?
No.
No.
I think you only have that madness for a certain amount of time in your life. And it goes away. What happens is you can't take on two new shows that overlap very easily. Lighting designers try it and it's dodgy. What you can do, what can happen is you accept a job and then you find out, you see, the Munich job opened on the Friday and I needed to travel to Los Angeles on the Sunday. And then sometime later, you find out that your production of The Sleeping Beauty is being revived. And they say, can you come back? Because we're changing the costumes. So you say, well, I can only do Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or whatever it was, Sunday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Oh, and the opening night. And it's when you try and fit in the revivals, the transfers, that it gets complicated.
Yeah.
I did draw the line when I think I was, yeah, I was doing shows in America, and opera. There's often, especially if they're doing more than one opera at a time, might get 2 or 3 days off. In fact, in LA, I used to get enough time to go to Las Vegas for a few days and, see some shows, and then fly back in and do another day. I think I used to do about 1 day a week in Los Angeles. Anyway, the question arose: the Royal Ballet were going to go to China and Japan, and the Royal Ballet were going to be the British arts ambassador thing that was going to be shown in China, in Beijing, to advertise the next Olympics were going to be at London.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. And Monica Mason said to me, was there any chance of me coming? Wow. Well, I looked at it, and the only time I would sleep would be on the plane from Los Angeles to Beijing. And they said they would fly me backwards and forwards because they also wanted me in Tokyo. Now I hum that song. I'm just a girl who can't say no. I actually said no.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be detrimental to my health, and I would urge you all to think about your health. And you've got to get that work-life balance. And I sort of, I trashed myself my body was trying to deal with stress, and it does have an effect on you. Whatever your weaknesses in your body will probably flare up. It might be in your stomach, it might be your skin, it might be your lungs, your breathing. And it's really hard when that happens.
Yeah.
I had 10 years at the National, and that was very stressful in its way, managing lots and lots of people. And it had an effect on my health. So you've got to balance that. What was the question? Have I answered it?
Yeah, we've got well past it. That's very important, I think, because that was when I started slowing down as well.
Yeah, look,
sooner to me, I sort of it gave in a little sooner, but I found that my health suffered, and I thought, no, this isn't good.
You've reminded me, Rory. What happens is the director that you love working for offers you a job, and it clashes, and you're desperate to do it because you know that if you don't, the director will find somebody else and then like them, and you'll be out of the loop. That happens. It's happened to me a few times. No, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy that you went on to light so many shows with the director that I used to light for, Rory. Hey, it could have happened to a more brilliant and nicer chap.
So I'm so happy that that we felt the need to bring it up. That's good.
No, I didn't mean to bring it up. But look, that's the way you got to know that director, of course, was because you got a break with me, coming out with me, because I couldn't do the whole job. So I came out, set it up with you, and then you did a fantastic job. And I'm really pleased. And Rory, let's be clear that that's happened to me, i.e. where I have got the job, got the gig, and other lighting designers no longer get that gig because I got it. Mm-hmm. So that's how it happened. That's what happens. So, I feel, it's unfortunate that certain ballet lighting designers lost out on working regularly for particular companies once I was on the scene.
Yeah.
And so that happens.
I want to talk a little bit about something that can be very exhausting, is when you start those initial chats and planning and all those things, and you have a point where you sometimes, not always, but sometimes feel you just don't have enough resources for what you want to do, whether it's people or it's items of kit or time. I mean, that can feel really, really draining, and you feel like it's your problem. It is your problem, but you feel like you're responsible for it. I mean, how do you go about it when you find you're up against it in terms of resources?
I'm just making some notes before I forget everything. You have got to work within the resource available. Now, you may need to say, you need to be treated fairly. So you may need to say to the producer, as I have done, as I've said, look, I can light your show with one light in 1 hour. If you give me 2 hours and some more lights, it'll be better. What do you want? What sort of show do you want? So that you put the responsibility a little bit back in their court. No problem for me to do it with one light in 1 hour. By the way, I did have one producer when I had a show that was going from out of London into the West End, and it was full of queues. Lighting was really important. And he said, what is the equity minimum lighting fee? What is the minimum? And I said, I'll tell you what the minimum is. On at the beginning and off at the end. This show isn't on at the beginning and off at the end, so we're not going there, okay?
Yeah, brilliant.
Cocky sod that I was.
Yeah.
He doesn't use me anymore, that producer.
That went well. Good.
No, he did use me after that, but we sued him because he didn't pay us our royalties. That's another story. You have to work within the resources available to you. Now, Rory, you were very clever because I think you listed most of the resources. We've got, equipment, we've got people, we've got time, we may have money, but the resource that can be compromised most often is time and people, i.e., with that I mean competence.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoy the chess game. Let's talk about equipment for a moment. I enjoy the chess game that we play, that if you turn up at the theatre and they give you the equipment list and they say there's a little bit of budget, I say, well, what can we have? I urge them to tell me what that will buy me from their hire company. Mm-hmm. They might come back and say, well, you can have 6 Lusters and 4 Vipers, or you can have 6 Vipers and 2 something else, And I'll go, okay, thanks. But I love the chess game we play with how do I make my systems out of this, random list of ingredients, of instruments. And we have to be able to do that. And I've worked on both sides of the fence, if it's not apparent. I worked for a long time managing other lighting designers, rigging, getting their shows rigged and focusing them, operating them, programming them. So I know what it's like to be on that receiving end. And I think that gives me a great strength as a lighting designer.
Yeah, definitely.
But I've got to design something with the resource available, first in equipment, that the number of people and the capability of the people is capable of doing. So if you've got someone who's not very good at programming, you better rethink how you're going to do your complicated effects that you haven't got any time for. Time is a really important aspect. And, the first production meeting, or the first time I meet the production manager, I want to see the schedule. But I like it when we talk about the schedule at the production meeting, because I want everybody in the room to hear this conversation. So I look at the schedule and I say, so what you're saying is the set will be up by 6 p.m. and that lighting will start focusing at 7 p.m. And what time will you be deading the borders? And the good production manager says, we'll be deading them at 5:30. It'd be good if you were there for that, or 5 o'clock at the end of the fit up. If there's a bit of, or worse still, we put them up after you focused, you go, no. So one of the things I would urge you to do is let's try and avoid things going wrong. That's the first thing we have to do.
Yeah.
And part of that is working within the resource, but also making sure we've explored the resource properly. So I was talking about time because people are a bit woolly about that if there isn't very much of it. Let's be realistic. That thing the production manager puts on, a little bit of time, before the tech starts. Mm-hmm. That you can have for lighting. Well, then you find that the stage manager will want to put the working lights on so they can sweep the stage, or something's got to happen, and that really you don't get the amount of time they're putting on the schedule.
Yeah, yeah. It's always comms and cue lights. Always comms and cue
Oh,
lights.
comms and cue lights, yes. So my message is try and make sure that you can preempt things from going wrong. I know we're going to talk about things going tits up, but try and avoid that. And that means that you've got to have the right people in the room for that conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Shall I tell the story about where the right people weren't in the room?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay, that later.
Yeah. But what I am keen to know, so I mean, that is sticking within your resource is really important because it can go wrong and that's your fault. If you don't stick within, if you say, but I must, darling, I must, and it's obviously out with that, then that is your own problem. And another thing that we have discussed previously is there are lots of places that the blame can lie for it going wrong, but the most unforgivable one is not doing your own homework.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Woe betide you if it's going to go pear-shaped because you haven't done your homework.
Yeah.
Woe betide you if that's because you've been lazy or because you were commuting between Munich and London or whatever.
Yeah. Have you ever gone into a rehearsal room and just felt completely underprepared for it?
Probably. And I've probably gone out of that rehearsal room, gone back to my hotel or wherever, and stayed up late, making sure that I was on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, Rory, I think, I'm talking about, things going wrong. You reminded me. Remember when I was doing that Munich, London, LA? Well, I had an assistant, an American assistant, who was doing all the prep in LA, and he'd sent me the plan which he had drawn, and the internet was very bad and I couldn't read the detail very well. Anyway, he'd made a typing error on the plan and most of the rig was in 201. It was a massive rig. Anyway, I get there and the assistant's gone off to do a show somewhere else, which he hadn't really agreed with me, and he wasn't there. First light comes up and it was a violent colour of yellow.
Oh.
101.
Yeah.
Instead of 201. And I hadn't quite seen very small writing on the plan because I was looking at it on a small computer. I didn't have always print it out, folks. Anyway, I'd gone, yeah, looks fine to me. Anyway, there was the first piece. I go, what is it? They went, 101 like it is on the plan. And I went, oh, it's supposed to be 201. No, it's 101. I went, sorry, 201. We need 120 cuts of 201. And you could hear it being echoed down the corridor. 120 cuts of 201, resource floors. 120 cuts of coming up. And I thought, oh, God. So, yeah, that is an example of cocking up where, it was totally the assistant's fault, but I didn't check, did I? Check everything and double check.
Yeah. You sort of touched on what to do when there's a lack of ability somewhere in the team. I mean, I hate to, this is going to sound very disparaging. I don't mean quite as it's going to sound, but that weak link can be anywhere, whether it's the director, the designer, it can be yourself, it can be the programmer. How do you, you have worked with so many teams. How do you approach it when you find out that you've got something that's really going to work against you, really, in this weak link?
I might look at the model and go, oh, God, this is going to be a nightmare, this design.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest fear in the weak link is the programmer.
Yeah.
Because I'm stuffed. I may already be stuffed if I haven't got any time. I may only have a few moving lights. But then if you add to that someone who can't program, because the fewer moving lights you have, the harder the rig will work. And that's more work for the programmer.
Yeah.
That scares me. And I've just been offered a job in a European country in December 21, okay? And the director said, are you up for it? And I worked there 3 times before. And I said, yeah, what is there not to like? You, the director, the designer I love, Handel, the composer. And I didn't write. And let's hope that by 2021, they will have learned how to program the wretched lighting desk.
Yeah.
They couldn't do in 2010, 12 and 14 or whenever I worked there.
Yeah, but what do you do when you have that situation with a programmer? I mean, essentially, do you have to limit your artistic output?
Yeah, you do. And in that situation, we're talking about a European country, you have 5 programmers. Now, the second time I worked there, the most important rehearsals were done by the head programmer, who was the worst programmer. He was the oldest and the worst. However, in the meantime, after the first and second time, a young, brilliant programmer arrived. And he was so young and they were so unaware of his brilliance that he would be put on the rehearsals that were done without lighting. So he had to come in the morning and put on the Grand Aimé, put on the working lights. And at the end of the rehearsal, turn them off again and just be there. Well, in the lunch break, we'd got chatting. I said, I've got some really complicated effects I need for the Tales of Hoffmann. And so we did them all. In the lunch break without anybody knowing. And when we got to the rehearsal, the stage rehearsal, the old clunky bloke pressed the button and the lights came up. And then there were all these links and follow-ons and this amazing whirling dervish effects happened. And I just sat there and said nothing.
Yeah. So you do have to limit your ideas, basically.
You have to limit your ideas or find a way through. I mean, some lighting designers who've been through that situation have said, I'm sorry, you've got to get another programmer. Now, what I did after the first time was I wrote to the management and said, look, I'd been trained extensively in management techniques when I was in the travel industry, doing my half year in skiing and travel. And I said, look, there's a training opportunity. I put it very positively. You need to invest more in training in the lighting department for them to discover the full capability of the lighting desk that you've spent so much money on. Well, that got translated. By the time it got to the lighting department, it was that I'd said they were all crap and they should be fired. When I turned up the second time, I went along the line, and the youngest one, who knew me from a German opera house, shook my hand warmly. And as I went up the line, the handshake stopped happening. And I got to the head of programming, who didn't put his hand out and just said, Scheisse. Now, I'm not fluent in German, but I knew what Scheisse meant.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you overcome that?
Well, I tried to put it right, you see. I tried to say, invest in the staff. I did very positive words, and it hadn't got round that way to them. So, no, I mean, woe betide anybody who was working for me that said Scheisse to the lighting designer in the days when I was, technical manager at the National. God help us if that happened.
Yeah.
Look, you've got to try and avoid that. You've got to think outside of the box. In Munich, they weren't that good on the lighting desk. And they wanted chaos at this point in the show. They wanted chaos in the lighting. It was a perspex set. It was very light orientated. And I had some 5Ks with scrolls in. And I just got them to start scrolling through the colours. And the whole thing, some went one way and some went the other way, became chaotic really quickly. But if I tried to put some sort of, this light on, then that light on and stuff, we'd never have got the show lit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tim Mitchell talked to you quite recently, and I know, you know, he talks about going on tour, and there's no point in having a big rig if they can only put a third of it up.
Yeah.
And there's no, you've got to, woe betide you if you can only light a third of the show.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, before you even get that far, what do you do when you rock up to the Focus and the set's on the floor? I mean, that's immediately now your problem, isn't it? Really, even though it shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I have rocked up, and the set's been on the floor. The set's been on the floor. More recently, I rocked up at Barcelona, and the set was all over. The set wasn't there. The floor was completely bare, and all the lighting bars were down. And I said, I cannot believe that you have summoned me here. I have rushed from Glasgow. And it had all been a nightmare where I had to fly from Glasgow to London and London to Barcelona. And I'd arrived at 11:30 at night, and the taxi had dropped me off at the wrong end of the pedestrian high street. And I dragged my wheelie bags down a cobble street at 11:30 at night, found my apartment. Next morning, I said, I can't believe you've done this. You know, you're obviously not ready for me. They said, one moment, they flew the lighting bars out, the stage floor opened, the set came up through the floor. Wow.
Wow.
Not so, though, when I turned up on the first date of a tour and there was all of my set on the floor. And ultimately it was going to be a nightmare. You know, we had, with the set was only up at like 6 o'clock in the evening and the curtain was going up at 8. Yeah. We focused without the set. But let's talk about putting a show on, you know, so you've got all that, you know, you're going to have technical lighting sessions and technicals and dress rehearsals. I call it concertinaing. The time gets concertinaed because what happens is the set takes longer, but this bit doesn't move. This bit is the start of the tech.
Yeah. And
what's concertinaed in is the focus time and the lighting time. And when I was at the National, some lighting designers would say to the production manager, I don't want the lighting time. And the production manager would say, I've cut the lighting time, lighting designer doesn't want the lighting time. I'd say, put it back in now. Because otherwise my concertina was being taken away from me, my little bit of time. What happens is the set overruns and we don't get our focus time. So we're probably focusing in the lighting time.
Yeah.
And we end up with no lighting time. So we're still wrong-footed. I bring you back to the production meeting where I want to know everyone's in the room. Is the set going to be there by this time? And I look at everybody who's going to be putting the set up in a smiling sort of a way. You know, I want to expose the weaknesses. What I don't want is a schedule, and some production managers do this, which makes everyone feel happy. Because everything's in there in the schedule.
Yes, yes.
It's not achievable. I want an achievable schedule. So the set isn't there, and they say things like, "This has happened to me so many times. Can you start out front of house?"
Yeah, yeah.
And I go, yes. I said I could do the stuff. We bring the act drop in. You know, let's say it's panto and there's a front drop or something. I can do that. And I say to them, can you then build the bit just behind the front drop? And we'll work that way, because then we can bring the next piece of scenery in, or the black or something, and you can carry on behind. But you've got to try and get going if you can.
Yeah.
But I've had situations where I've gone back and I've said, okay, I've done the front of house. How are we doing? And they're not ready.
Yeah. And what happens then? I think it can be very, very, especially, so what I'm driving at here is, this is a really, really common thing now, that the set's not finished. Or, oh, well, we didn't think you'd need X, Y, Z. But the reality is you are going to come across this. So how do you stop yourself feeling completely overwhelmed at that point?
Well, you need to have a good quality conversation with everybody's involved. Mm-hmm. So you need your chief electrician or your lighting manager. You probably need the master carpenter, who's too busy with 4 nails sticking out of his mouth to actually talk to you. So it might be just a production manager. So how are we going to make this work?
And
can we delay the tech?
Yeah.
And they go, no, we can't possibly do that. And it starts to focus them a bit if they can't move the tech. And you have the chief with you to say, well, it's going to take us 6 hours to focus, or we'll carry on late into the night. Can we carry on? And then we'll come in later in the morning. Or shall we go away and come back early in the morning? I mean, there are various options that might come up.
Yeah. And there is compromise, isn't there?
There has to be compromise, and there has to be negotiation. And what you can't just have is no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And it's really good if you are seen to be compromising. What if I do this? What if I do that?
Yeah.
I remember a director coming in. He arrived. He was a bit late because his wife had decided to have a baby that day, so he came straight from the hospital. So he didn't know what had gone on. Anyway, he literally arrived in the rehearsal, and afterwards he said, I thought it was very good. I thought scene 2 was a bit strange. I said, yeah, they only put the scenery up 5 minutes before the dress started, so we haven't lit it yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's very tricky.
What if some of the scenery isn't needed until Act 2? Can we just get Act 1 up? What is it that what elements is it you really need to focus with?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like Rory, I don't like starting to focus without the borders being deaded and the wings.
Yeah,
you know,
and also
come back from a lunch break and go, where's my backlight? It's not coming through. What's happened? Oh, someone's hung another border up.
Yeah. Yeah. But that was one of the things I was going to talk to you about, was about I think masking in particular is such an assumption that it'll be there, and actually it's so often just if it's been left to someone else, it's so often dreadful and doesn't fit what you want at all.
Yeah. We know about assume, don't we?
Well, yes, but do go on.
Assume makes an ass of you and me, as was pointed out to me. You assumed, said the famous Hollywood film director. And you think, oh God, because you were always relieved when you was having to get somebody else rather than you, but you felt sorry for them. And you went to sort of went out and took them out for glasses of wine afterwards if they were barked at.
Yeah.
Don't assume anything. And I always go, let's look at the masking, shall we? And they say, oh, no, we do that later on. I go, no, let's look at it on the ground plan. Let's look at it in section. We must have a section, an elevation where we can see, here's the light, here's my beam of where I want it to get to, down to the front of the stage. And the border has to, here's the sight line from the audience. So I want the border to stop us from seeing the light, but I want the light to get through. That means the border has to be far enough away for the light to be not scraping past it. Because you've already said I've got to have, an empty bar on either side of the lighting bar or whatever. So then they try and ram a border in there.
Yeah.
If they do, then you can't use backlights. They can only do crosslight, high crosslight.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, just 'cause I'm worried about time a little bit, but I want to talk about plotting sessions. I mean, they can be hugely tiring when you're already behind and your concertina's squished, and there's a lot of pressure from yourself. I mean, I personally leave a plotting session more often than not quite panicked and thinking, Christ, we didn't cover enough ground. I'm not happy with what is there. We don't have any more time. We go straight into tech. The thing about a plotting session, though, that you have said to me on several occasions is it's not even just about getting stuff in the desk. It's about gauging a reaction from some other members of the team. I wonder if you could talk to us about that.
Yeah. It's interesting, lighting sessions, because lots of lighting designers say they hate lighting sessions. Well, the reason they hate lighting sessions, I think, especially if this is the first time you work with a director, because we can talk till the cows come home, but actually we can only show what we really mean when we're in the theatre with the lights, And I've been misquoted in one book. It slightly misquotes me, but actually what I was saying was, when you say, you make a first lighting, so everyone's sitting there attentive and quiet. You say, did you mean something like this? And there's a silence. and you feel sick. In fact, you feel as exposed as you would be if you stood on top of the production desk naked with no clothes on. That's how it feels.
Yeah.
So one of the ways I've found, incidentally, if you're going to have a difficult conversation, it's good if you've already had some pleasant conversations beforehand. You know, that's one of my tricks. But when I get to the lighting session, I like to say to the people that turn up, which is probably the director, and there might be an assistant director if it's a bigger show, and the designer probably is there. I say, may I show you around, give you a little guided tour of my ingredients, of my instruments.
Yeah.
And I will have prepared things with the programmer beforehand, and I'll flip through my systems. And I might say, I've got this backlight and it can change color. So it might be that we could do this shade of blue. Now, if I hear, yum, I like that, I go, great. If I hear, ugh, sort of sounds coming from beside me, I go, well, maybe we won't be going to that sort of blue. Let's try this sort of a blue then. What do you think of that? Oh, yes, I think that's much more whatever the scene we might be needing for it for. You start to get a bit into what their taste bud is. And then you could say, now I've got these moving lights and we can give a texture in the light. I was a bit nervous about using the word gobo. Gobos? You're not using gobos, are you? Says one or two designers to me. No. What's that then? I said, that's a texture in the light. We might texture the light. And again, if I get, oh, the my dead body, are you putting that on my set? I go, oh, no, well, we won't go there then, will we? Cut. But if I get yum yum sounds, that's nice, yes, then I know where we are. And if I get ugh sounds, I go, hang on a minute though, what does it look like if we put it at 20% very soft? Ah, they go, yes, I see what you mean now.
Yes, yeah.
And I might start to combine elements. So we can make the set go dark blue, but we can make the characters glisten white. They don't have to be dark blue. And it would be like this. So, you know, I put on the cross light and the strong backlight that doesn't do much to the actor's form.
Yeah.
Now we've got a little bit of information about where we're going. But you're probably going to ask me, but what happens when they say, I don't like this?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you might have been trolling along for a bit and you're just not getting there. I say, there comes a point where I say, I need to think about this. I need to think about this a bit. Can we come back to this?
Yeah.
Let's move on. I don't want to waste everybody's time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an overnight thing, and during the night I work out what to do.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of things going on in my head. Shall I cut those specials that I've saved up for Act 3 and use those to save the day? Bit dangerous because we've not got to Act 3 yet. Or shall I get another light rigged? Or, you know, but in the night, when I got some time to myself, I'd probably get an answer.
Yeah. And you've had it. This is something that we shan't name names, but you've had it in a focus session with a designer going, "Oh, you're not going to do that," and you go, "Well, of course it's got to be at full in order to focus." I mean, you've had it at various stages of the process.
Yeah, I think I've had it so many times. I don't know which show you might be referring to, but oh yes. Frustratingly, I had it with a very, very famous designer who was constantly criticizing my lighting. And, you know, the programmer was trying to help and he wanged a gobo up on this thing. And the designer said, "Don't put that on, it looks like a roadmap of Coventry." And I wasn't even allowed to get it at 17% very soft.
Yeah, yeah. But you've had it with long-term collaborators, even who have understood your process for years, and then at the last minute have gone, "Why is it at full?" And you go, "What's the focus?"
Yeah.
And you go, "Well, not now."
Now it's yes, they do. They go, ooh, and you go, we're just focusing it. Wait. In fact, I told famous Hollywood film director Clang, Billy Friedkin, I said to him, hold on a moment. I went, hold on. I went, because in the middle of, directing the stuff, hold on. I said, and he's sitting there going, hold on. What is hold on? No one's ever told me to hold on. What do you want me to hold on to?
Going, yeah. There was actually a question came in here.
Yes, I know who you're thinking of, Rory.
Yeah, there was a question came in here that said, have you ever had a show where the director has disagreed with almost every look/idea you've come up with? And if so, how do you tackle that?
Yeah. You've got to get under the skin of their taste bud. So hopefully you've done your research and looked at shows they've done before. And, with my little guided tour, I've already got a bit of an idea, but I certainly had an example where I was lighting a show with an inexperienced director. And in fact, she'd only lit shows in shopping centres, I think, so she never had lighting. And I decided that in the various dance bits, we should be transported. And she decided that she wanted me to stay in reality, naturalistic reality. And I went, okay. And I said to the programmer, cut, cues 21 to cue 50 are cut. And he went, no, because he loved those cues so much. And I went, no. He was a young programmer, student programmer. And I said, no, it's part of the learning process. You can, if you think the director might come up to you, which they do, and go, I was wrong, you were right, put those cues back in the desk, save them up in the thousands somewhere so you can bring them back or link round them. But be quite prepared to just cut them.
Yeah.
We have to move on from, I've put my favourite gobo or my favourite colour or my favourite light in the rig. Is it helping to tell the story? You may decide that you're going to have a little meeting later. Now, in the example I gave of the roadmap of Coventry, I was on my second show with that designer. On the first one, he was even ruder about the lighting to start with. We got phenomenal reviews, I should say, when it was finished. But I said, come on, we're going for a drink afterwards. This designer is much older than me, probably about 20 years ago. I could pass for slightly younger. I said, we're going to talk about it. So I paid for the wine, a bottle of red wine in the Malmaison Hotel. And he said, tell me, have you ever lit a tutu ballet before? I went out to put me back in my box. Yes, I had lit a tutu ballet before, but it's hard having those conversations if you haven't socialized with the designer or the director. I think in the case you were giving me of somebody who I've worked with many times going, oh, I don't like it. And you're going, it's a full, wait a minute. I had worked with that designer a lot, but we're good friends and we cooked dinner for each other. So I could talk to her in a certain way. Yeah. Whereas if you don't know the person, it's difficult to talk to them. So have conversations. Now, the other thing is, when I say have conversations, have meaningful conversations. So in one of the management training courses I was on, they were talking about how you tell somebody they're not good enough. And the John Cleese, whoever it was, playing the part, said, you need to pull your socks up. And the chap goes, oh, okay. And the point was, well, how much do you need to pull his socks up? 3 inches, 6 inches, 9 inches, or a foot? We have to be specific. So we have to have meaningful and specific conversations. So when things are going wrong, we need to get under the skin of what it is they don't like. Is it the intensity or the density of the colour that they don't like? Mm-hmm. I've had situations at the Royal Opera House where I've gone in, and they've been relighting it for me, and I've gone in to see how they're getting on or whatever. And I've gone, what's happened to me whirly-doo-doo effect? And they go, oh, Monica cut it. Now, I'm not sure if they really liked rigging the whirly-doo-doo effect, because it was a bit of work. So I find my time, and I quietly say to Monica, I see we don't have the whirly-doo-doo effect anymore. And she went, no, it seems to have gone. And I said, well, they say you cut it. And she said, I didn't cut it. What I said was that I thought we needed a bit more light downstage left or something. And so it's, what do people hear in a conversation?
Yeah, yeah.
And in the management training course, you reminded me that I did, there were two managers, and one was trying to give feedback to the other one. One is getting feedback from the workforce, and the other one is the catering manager. And so one manager says to the catering manager, they don't like your food. And the catering manager says, don't worry, I'll do something about it. I know what to do. Very good, says the manager, and off they go. They've had this conversation. But what we then saw was the thought bubble. The manager says they don't like your food, but the thought bubble was they want steak and kidney pudding. The catering manager says, yeah, don't worry, I'm absolutely on it. I'm going to sort it out. And the thought bubble is, I'm going to give them piri-piri rice with harissa sauce. So she's going to make it even worse because she's not being given proper feedback.
Yeah.
So we have to seek out, we have to get under the skin of the feedback. Yeah. Of what it means. And we have to try and do that in a non-confrontational way. So it's no good saying, well, what don't you like about my lighting? And it might be that you say, okay, let's move on. Let's get something in the desk and let's us spend some time afterwards talking about quite what it is.
Yeah. You might have seen this. A question from Ian here.
Well, I've not been keeping up.
Ian is based in Scotland, so this will make a lot of sense. Did you enjoy lighting the magic flute at Scottish Opera, steampunk staging? And did you enjoy working with Sir Thomas Allen as you also worked with him on Don Giovanni at the Theatre Royal? I mean, a fantastic company and a fantastic director.
Yeah. I also, Ian, lit Barbara of Seville and Marriage of Figaro. When I did Magic Flute, it was my fourth opera with Simon Higglett, the designer, and Sir Tom Allen, the opera singer now directing, who I had also lit. So, yes, I loved it. The Scottish Opera is the finest opera company in the world, matched only by Glyndebourne. It's not just the finest opera company in Scotland, where it's probably nearly the only one, but it is absolutely wonderful, fantastic across the board. And this is where it becomes a joy. Fantastic lighting crew, fantastic stage crew, fantastic costume department. Just wonderful. They love us, we love them. Now, there was a problem on Magic Flute when we did it originally. No time. Tons of scenes, masses of effects, no time. Countered by the brilliance of the team, you can cope with it. But we were under pressure. Gianni crashed, okay.
It's all right, he's back in.
Back, okay, that's good. We were under incredible pressure, but because we'd worked together so many times before, there was a level of trust. Tom Allen's wife, who'd known me for a long time too, came up to me after the General, and I said, how was it? She said, well, you've got some work still to do, haven't you? And she was right. I turned it round, but in the first time round we did it, between the General and the opening night.
Can you just explain what the General is?
Oh yeah, General. In opera and in ballet, the final dress rehearsal is called the General. Now, in theatre, in plays and musicals, we're lucky if we get one dress rehearsal, They try and put 2 in if they can. And then we get lumbered with lots of previews when we can tinker away. In opera and ballet, we tend to do a number of dress rehearsals or a number of runs, first with piano, then with orchestra, then we'll do a pre-gen, which is just the one before the general, then we'll do the general, and quite often in the general, they invite an audience, which is a bit scary, but it's still a rehearsal. And then you get the opening night, and there's probably a day off between each one when you go and recover from the drinks you have after each rehearsal.
Yeah, cause the general's also, there's a general, I mean, I know I've been to a couple in Scottish Opera. The general's also, as well as the general, it's also called the open rehearsal because they've got the audience in and everything.
Yeah.
Because sorry, I'm going back.
Yeah, to the audience, they probably call it open rehearsal to make it clear to the audience that it is a rehearsal. The parlance to us backstage tends to be the general or the gen. When's the gen?
Yeah, because when I was at college doing my production in technical theatre, I did 2-week work experience at Scottish Opera when they did the kind of revival. This was 95. We did a revival of La Belle Helene when at the end of the show they built a kind of basically half scale front of the engine of a Eurostar and crashed it through the wall. I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But
that's
no,
of that famous Belgian, I think it's a Belgian photograph where the train is coming through the cafe wall.
Yeah.
It sounds like they've reworked that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but I totally agree with you. I mean, for what you're saying about Scottish Opera are just in a league of their own.
Yeah. Well, guess where I should be today? It was going to be one of those. It was going to be one of those.
Scottish Opera doing Don Giovanni with Tom Allen.
Yeah, and it was one of those strange overlaps where, and I said let's be open about it. I negotiated with Glyndebourne because I'd already agreed Don Giovanni, which was a revival, but Glyndebourne was also going to be reviving Madame Butterfly, and this week or next week I was going to have to hurtle between the two. But I was quite open about it with Glyndebourne. And curiously, the only thing that I was going to miss at Glyndebourne was the general, which I said is with an audience, and you don't want me messing with the lighting then anyway.
Yeah.
Rory, did I get the message about a meaningful conversation across there?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So, get under the skin, make sure you're not having a piri rice conversation where the director means one thing and you think they mean something else.
Yeah. We're running out of time rapidly because, I mean, we could go on for forever, but I just
Sorry.
No, not at all. Don't apologise. We are a horrendous industry for imposter syndrome. We all feel it at some point. Did you ever have a point in your career where you just felt completely out of your depth?
Oh, gosh, yes. Yes.
Because I think we all feel like we're the only one to feel it, but I think it's very common, really.
I had a show, I'd done it at the Royal Opera House, and it was being shared with American Ballet Theatre, and it was going to open in America in the Met. And by this stage, I'd been working when I first arrived at the Royal Opera House, I'd been working for 30 years, and I said I wasn't ready one day sooner. I arrived at the Met, and I was scared senseless by the schedule. It was arrive Monday, focus light, dress rehearsal Tuesday, day off Wednesday because they had a matinee and an evening show of something else. Thursday, focus light, dress open. No, focus light, dress. Friday, focus light, dress open. And the reason they can do that is they have multiple casts.
Mm-hmm.
in ballet. So very little time between a dress rehearsal and the opening night. And on the Saturday, I said, I've just got a couple of notes to do. And they said, you can do those between 2 and 2:30. I said, the curtain goes up at 2:30. They said, yeah, we come in at 2.
Yeah.
I wasn't out of my depth. I was just scared. And after that experience, I decided not to be scared anymore. I'm not going to be scared. Don't waste too much time being scared. Out of your depth. Well, try and recognize if you're out of your depth as soon as possible and phone a friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
You may feel out of your depth when you're drawing the plan. Phone a friend.
Yeah.
I phoned a friend when I was doing my first big ballet. I asked Paul Pine, I said, help me, what full colour shall I put in my ground row? I've got to do morning, noon and night, sunsets, this, that and the other, and he helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, I've helped other people. What else was I going to say apart from phone a friend? Here's a technique that I've used for many, many years. I go into the theatre and I say to the head of lighting or lighting manager or chief lecturer, I say, how do you do your front of house cover here? What works? And, Ian, in Glasgow, there's that lovely bridge and there's used to be 3 or 4 2Ks, now they're source 4s. Well, it's quite clear, you can come straight in from there. Years and years ago, I was in my first Horseshoe Theatre. I'd never been in a Horseshoe Theatre or lit in one before, and it was Theatre Royal Stratford East. And I said to the chief electrician, how do you do your front of house coverage here? And he said, well, you see that bar out there? I come straight in from there. Bong, 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 bong. I went, oh, right, great. And then he said to me, oh, and over here, and he gave me some spurious information. I like to put some whatever's here, here, and here, and here, here, and there. I went, oh, okay. Anyway, I went back to work on the plan, and I did the front of house like he told me to. And then I thought about this thing he'd given me about the sides. So it was really strange. I couldn't work it out. Anyway, I just left them off the plan. Anyway, we didn't know each other until some days on, and we were having a drink. And I said, by the way, David, by the way, what was that bit about rigging some 1, 2, 3s here, here, and here? He said, I popped that in to see if you did it because I wanted to check if you were any good or not. And if you were any good, you'd leave them off the plan. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you'd put them on the plan. So be careful who you get your advice from when you phone a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, gosh.
And if they say something and you don't understand it, say, just explain that to me a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt out of my depth, curiously, years and years of experience when I went into the Royal Exchange of Manchester. God, it was so many levels and it went up and up and the thing in the middle. And the only way I could draw the plan was by sitting in the theatre to do it.
Yeah.
I was in my depth when I started to light it, but momentarily I felt out of my depth.
Yeah. One sort of final thing I want to touch on is what to do when it feels like it's going wrong and it's out of your control. Things like when it comes through in the show report that it's all going wrong. I mean, there's a very delicate balance, isn't there, between when to wade in versus leaving the people to deal with it that are there. You don't want to undermine anyone.
No, you need to think very carefully about when you reply all and when you just reply to one person. Or you just send an email to one person saying, what is going on with the follow spots? Or what is going on with the flying? Or you may send an email to the director saying, I'm going to investigate this, leave it with me. Mm-hmm. Or you may decide to stay quiet and read the emails that are going backwards and forwards between people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never write in an email anything that could accidentally be read by someone that you're complaining about. Word your emails very carefully, because we've all hit reply all instead of not. Yeah. And, when you say that the trouble with the flyman is that, he couldn't fly a kite, let alone a scenery, and it accidentally goes to him, or you send it to someone and you don't realise that they're married to the flyman or fly person.
Yeah.
I have had situations where it's quite funny where they say, by the way, just to let you know, the programmer is married to the stage manager before you're rude about one of the other and the other one. I'm going, oh, right. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather like my friend's a solicitor, and he was about to have a tricky operation which involved the surgeon plunging something up somewhere, and he said, just want to let you know before you put me under that I am a solicitor.
Yeah.
I am a lawyer. He was a very dour surgeon. He said, oh, thank you very much for letting me know.
That's fantastic. We're just sort of coming to the end now, really, but I've been doing 5 little quick questions with people before we wrap up. So I'm going to start with one production that you'd love to revisit.
Oh, well, I'd like to revisit the first ballet I ever lit, which is Far From the Madding Crowd. I lit it 25 years ago. It set me off on my way lighting ballet because it was a sensational piece and I did a sensational job on it with no moving lights,
Yeah.
with no lusters, with no colour changes. It was a massive rig and I'd love to go back to that, but especially to go back to it with the crew of the Birmingham Royal Ballet, because they are fantastic.
Yeah.
And we put that show on. I don't know if you know, I'm supposed to do this quickly, aren't I? I should have just said, Far From the Madding Crowd, end. Sorry.
Go on. What, you're here now, go on.
We put that show on despite the lack of time and originally despite gross incompetence.
Yeah.
We subsequently redid it with the revamped lighting team and we had a ball.
You're a fantastic host. So I want to know someone that you would invite to one of your dinners, dead or alive. One person that you'd like to have around for dinner.
Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Oh, there we go. Your favourite and least favourite part of the process?
The least favourite part is the meet and greet and the read through. It is informative, but I just want to get on. Come on. Let's get it up on its feet.
Yeah.
My favourite is the tech.
Yeah.
The mayhem of the tech.
Yeah.
And being in there and solving problems and just bringing it to life. Bringing all of those elements together for the first time.
Yeah, it's a fantastic moment. 3 words that describe your work.
Illuminating, atmospheric, and appropriate.
Very good. And finally, if you were to write an autobiography right now, a bestseller, of course, what would the title be?
You got there in the end.
Yeah, fantastic.
Or if only he'd been in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, you can have a tagline. We'll let that be the tagline. Mark, thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant talking to you and so useful. Thank you.
Yeah, and the answer is yes, Ian.
Thank you.